Is there really even a point for me to worry about or put in the effort to pass on those traditions and customs and religious values to the next generation?
You are really their last hope, their last chain in this long thread of our ancestry.
What are some things that you did at home with your kids to keep them immersed in their Indian culture?
I try to incorporate what they're already doing, but put our own Indian twist on it. I pick out the yellow M&Ms from a bag of M&Ms. They pick out the yellow gummies, things that they will eat because it's like prasad, right? They're not technically the correct way to celebrate Saraswati Puja, but in this age level that I'm at right now in my parenting journey is what works for us. We have to make it a point that they go and celebrate Holi with them. We have to make it a point that we go to Garba with them, because it's one thing to watch a Bollywood movie, but it's another to actually be in the moment.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Indian Parent Podcast, the podcast that is redefining parenting in Indian families. I am Rinie Gupta and I'm the co-host of this show. We release new episodes every Friday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, so be sure to subscribe to catch the latest updates. Today's episode is dedicated to Indian families who live outside of India. And while the expat life may seem great on the outside, they're all going through struggles of their own. One of the big struggles they face is their kids losing touch with their Indian identity, religious values, and their mother tongue. Many people who follow me on Instagram assume I live in India, but I don't. I have lived in Singapore for the past 17 years and I'm a Singaporean, and I'm now raising my daughter in Singapore as well. But because I was born and raised in India, I do have a strong Indian identity, which I can see diluting every day in my daughter. She has adopted the dominant culture of Singapore a lot more. She speaks more Chinese than she speaks Hindi. She celebrates Chinese New Year with a lot more gusto than she celebrates Diwali. And she would any day pick Hainanese chicken rice over Rajma Chawal. And I'm sure if you're raising kids in any country outside of India, you are facing a version of this struggle too. Well, fret not, because today we have a very special guest who is not only going to give us the encouragement, but also practical advice to pass down our traditions to the next generation. She is Avani Modi Sarkar, the co-founder of Modi Toys and mom of 3 who lives in New Jersey with her family. They make the most unique plushies for kids in the form of Hindu gods and goddesses which sing the mantras when you press their belly. They also make several books to easily educate our kids about the various festivals and deities that we have. Avani has kept the spirit of Indian customs and traditions alive in her own unique ways with her kids, and she's here to teach us exactly how we can do with ours. So without further ado, let's welcome Avani to get this episode started. Hi Avani, thank you for being on our show today. How are you doing?
I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for staying up late to talk to me.
It's my pleasure. I am just so eager to learn from you about this topic that I introduced earlier, which is keeping our Indian roots alive, especially in families who are living outside of India. Because I think this is really an uphill battle. So I live in Singapore, and while I'm a first generation Singaporean, I can already see the Indianness sort of getting diluted. Because with my daughter, she's a second generation Singaporean and she doesn't really speak the language. She doesn't take interest in a lot of the customs. Sure, she'll be excited by the outfits, but
Yeah,
that's pretty much
Yeah.
where it stops.
Right.
So sometimes I really wonder as a parent is there really even a point for me to worry about or put in the effort to pass on those traditions and customs and religious values to the next generation? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I see it too. I mean, I'm on the same boat as you. I didn't think about any of these things, honestly, until I became a parent myself. I took all of this for granted when I was growing up, and when my parents were trying to instill a lot of these Indian cultural values growing up, how they really insisted that I speak Gujarati at home. If I was literally in the middle of a sentence, they would say, nope, say it again in Gujarati, and they would literally make me repeat myself, but in Gujarati. And at the time, I thought it was so annoying that they were doing this, but now I get it because I'm so much more fluent than I would have been, right? If I hadn't done those things. So I think it's really important, because if we are sort of that bridge between our parent generation and our kids, and even if your kids are lucky to have their grandparents around, they're not going to be around forever, right? So you are really their last hope, their last chain in this long thread, right, of our ancestry. I think our parents were the generation where they had to figure out, okay, how am I going to leave my motherland behind and move to a brand new country and create a foundation there, raise my kids. And now we are figuring out something completely different. Like now it's not so much about like how do we uproot ourselves, move to a different country. Now it's like, okay, how do we make sure that we retain everything that our parents worked so hard to, instill in us and not lose? And how do we make sure that we pass it on? I think with every generation, your level of expectation of what is passed on, unfortunately, does get lowered and lowered, but we have to make the effort. And I think all of that comes from your desire of wanting to, right? Like you have to want to pass it on. Nothing happens without intent. And so you have to have the intent to want to make a difference, like see the change you want in your kids, whether it's the language they speak, the food they eat, the clothes they wear, the holidays they celebrate. All of that begins with intent. And I think that's the part that our generation has to make sure that we do a really good job of reminding ourselves, like, are we placing focus on the right intentions?
I think growing up, few of our fondest memories are almost always attached to these things, right? Whether it's the language that we speak, the festivals that we have, the clothes that we wear, the events that we attend. And a large part of our childhood was commanded by these things. You are in the States and I am in Singapore. Now our children, they might be getting more involved in the cultures of the dominant cultures there. Like for you, they might be, your children might be more interested in Christmas and
Like
Thanksgiving. My
Halloween, yeah.
yeah. My kid, like she's been singing Chinese New Year songs for the past 2 weeks now, and I can't get her to stop. Right? So while I appreciate her immersing herself into these other cultures as well, I want her to be able to take the same pride and joy in our culture because for me those were the best parts of my childhood and I want to share that with her and enable her to pass it on. Given that your parents moved here but they still managed to clearly keep those traditions and customs alive in you, you get so passionate about it and you have your whole company dedicated, your entire business is dedicated to keeping these roots alive. How else did you do that besides getting you to speaking Gujarati? What are the other things that they did to really have you immersed into your own culture as well, despite growing up in the US?
So I think for my parents, it wasn't ever a conscious decision. Like they think in Gujarati, right? So for them, it came very naturally for them to speak to us in Gujarati. Whereas for me, my primary language has become English. Same thing when it came to food. Like my mom, like she grew up on Indian food, so that's what she knows how to make most. Whereas I think for me, it's like I do have to make a conscientious effort. If I've been feeding my kids pasta like 5 days in a row, like I'll feel guilty, like no, like I need to make some Indian food now. Or if I feel like okay, I'm going like really big on Christmas, like at home, if I have a tree and presents, or I'm like, well, no, like I have to make sure that I also make it make Diwali a big deal too. So for me, like I'm always having these inner dialogues, whereas like with my parents, like that was never really the case. Like my parents never really had to debate whether like okay, if we're gonna really go big on Thanksgiving and Christmas, we also have to make sure we make a big deal about like Navratri and Diwali. It was never a this or that. It was just more like, okay, well, Diwali is what we celebrate, so Diwali is what we are going to really go big on. We didn't grow up like celebrating Halloween, for example, whereas like my kids, like every year they get so excited about Halloween, like they're thinking about their Halloween costumes in March, and I'm like, okay, it's like 6 months away, but they're already thinking about what costume they want to dress up as and stuff. So just how like that excitement is like kind of innately built in because of their environment. That's what I try to like, those are the sparks I try to like kind of plant along the way. Like, how can I have them look forward to Diwali or Navratri or Holi, whatever it may be. And, and I see that now. So like, for example, my middle one, Sanvi, she loves Holi compared to my other two kids. They don't love getting color on them as much, whereas my middle one, like she's like bring it on, like throw it all over me. And so every year she like looks forward to it. Like and like I love that. Like I love the fact that like now it's become a core memory for her by the age of 4. But I think the key is that we have to be the ones like to, kind of immerse our kids in these like different situations. Like we have to make it a point that that we go and celebrate Holi with them. We have to make it a point that we go to Garba with them, because, it's one thing to like watch a Bollywood movie that shows these scenes of like people playing Holi. It's one thing to like read a book about, celebrating Diwali, but it's another to actually like be in the moment. So you have to do these things, even if sometimes you may not enjoy it yourself as much. Like, for example, my husband, not a fan of Holi. He's like, don't touch me, don't come near me with those colors. So, I understand that my husband may not be like, all in on it, but I am going to be the stewardess for our culture. I'm going to be the one to make sure that we make Holi happen at home, if for nobody else than for her. So I think that's what you have to remember, that even if you're not doing it for yourself, like you have to do it for your kids.
Outside of India, something that really helps is joining those like community-based groups and
Yeah,
societies. I've been in Singapore for 16 years now, and my husband's been here for 10 years, but we never thought about joining the Singapore Gujarati Society until last year, because it was only last year we realized that the way they do up Janmashtami and Navratri, and I mean Navratri is a huge thing in the Gujarati culture. And the way they do it up, no matter how hard we try, we will not be able to recreate that spirit inside of our homes. We need to really give our child that community feel, which is what we grew up with back in India. Now, instead of just trying to do a small thing at home, we would just head out and join a bigger community to really, I think it's a different vibe to it.
totally. I think that's why mandirs also, especially if you look at mandirs like the BAPS organization, right? They have done such a phenomenal job of really creating these communities, and they have such amazing programming, for all different age groups, that really makes the experience of going to the mandir like that much more inviting and that much more accessible. And they really want to make it child friendly, family friendly, so that people don't necessarily associate going to the mandir with like just the religious aspect, but really the community fostering aspect as well.
What can parents do when they don't really have the time or the resources to be able to join these community events? What are some things that you did at home with your kids to keep them immersed in their Indian culture and the Hindu religion?
Honestly, I draw a lot of inspiration from what I see my kids doing in school. Just this past fall, my 8-year-old daughter, she came home with a coloring sheet where it was like a picture of a pumpkin, but it was sort of drawn in this like kaleidoscope type of a pattern. And each of the little pieces actually had an equation on it. Like, one little piece had 1 plus 5, another one had like 3 minus 2. And you had to first calculate the equation. And then there was like a little key in the corner where it told you color in like red for like the number 3, color in yellow for the number 5, etc. And so I was like, wow, this is like so simple, but like such a great way to like now celebrate Halloween, right? And so I was like, wait, why don't they have this for Diwali, for Rangoli? So my first stop always was to go online to see if something like this exists, because I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. And I think I only found one example of what I was looking for. But being like the guju I am, I was like, I'm not paying like $5 for this. I can just do this myself. So like I literally just like took out like a sheet of paper and a Sharpie, and I drew my own Rangoli like in that same like kaleidoscope type of pattern. And then I scanned it, I printed it out so that they had a bunch of copies to work with. And then, yeah, I mean, in like a matter of like, less than 24 hours, I was able to kind of recreate that same kind of exercise for her, but now with the Diwali theme. So instead of like coloring in a pumpkin, she was coloring in a Rangoli. And so now it's up on our website at Modi Toys. I have like a whole page full of like resources, like to celebrate everything from Holi to Mahashivratri to Diwali, like you name it. But that's just an example of like how I try to kind of just incorporate what they're already doing, what they're already learning, but put our own like Indian twist on it. Because it's, again, like I said, it's not about reinventing the wheel. Like I just want them to do what they're doing, but also do it for our own traditions, our own culture as well, because I think that makes it more stickier, right? What is that saying? Neurons that fire together, wire together or something. So I don't
Yeah.
necessarily need them to like learn something new. I just need them to learn what they're already learning, but like in a different way. And so I've tried to create these types of activities at home. I took
Yeah.
out a big sheet of wax paper and I drew like a little map and had like a starting point and a finishing point. And at the starting point, it was Ram. And at the finish
Mhm.
point, it was Sita. And basically, Ram had to like, get to Sita. And because it's on wax paper, all I did was I took a little drop of water and I added some food coloring to it so you can see the drop of water. And I gave this was a great exercise for a 4-year-old and even a 3-year-old. I gave her a toothpick and she had to basically like slowly drag the drop of water, slowly trace it along the path that I had drawn out for her to help Ram reach Sita. She had already like read the story about how he goes searching for Sita. And so now this was making it a little bit more tangible because it's like a
Yeah.
hands-on activity. And so like little like seeds that you drop along the way makes the whole story of Diwali that much more stickier, because I mean, let's be honest, like they hear the story once a year, right? It's not like every night for bedtime we're reading the story of Diwali. But when you do these types of activities with them, it makes the story that much more stickier in their mind. And so like now if in the middle of like let's say March I mention Ram or Sita, she doesn't have a confused look on her face, like, who are you talking about? She's like, oh yeah, I remember Ram and Sita, right?
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that I try to do, where it's not the way, obviously, our parents, like, celebrated. Like, my parents obviously never did these things with me, but times have changed and you have to change with the times, and you just have to learn to kind of adapt and immerse yourselves into the language, so to speak, that your kids are already speaking, and do the things that your kids are already doing.
I love the idea that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, just adapt it to incorporate, your Indian customs. Is that how you came up with the idea for the god and goddess plushies?
Yeah, so the credit for the idea for our plush toys completely goes to my brother. So my brother and I were both expecting our first child in like 1 week apart. He actually was looking for a gift, like some sort of like a toy to give to his newborn daughter. And he had gone like I think shopping at like Toys R Us and Target, which are all like major big box retailers here in America. And he came back empty-handed. And I don't think he necessarily knew what he was looking for at the time. Like I don't think when he went shopping he was like looking for a baby Ganesh, right? But it wasn't until he didn't find anything that really like resonated with him that he came home kind of feeling like dejected, feeling like, man, like why isn't there a toy out there that looks like a Ganesh, but instead of like singing nursery rhymes, it actually sang mantras when you squeeze the belly. And as he's saying it, he's saying it like so matter of factly, like, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm sure it exists. Like, just like, look online. Like, also feeling like, well, like it's such an obvious idea. Like, obviously, it's out there somewhere. And then so, we all like take out our phones and we're like searching on Google, on Amazon, and like scrolling, and nothing. And the closest thing that we could find at the time was this Ganesh plush, which had like 6 arms, this massive tilak, and like it did not look kid friendly at all. Like I don't know who designed it. It's like something you would find like at some random like street vendor, like in India. And it had no voice component, like no audio component to it. And so I was like, oh, I don't know, I guess maybe you have an idea here. But I went and had a baby a week later, then he had a baby a week after that. And so I forgot all about this idea of his until he came to me with an actual like sketch 4 months later after our babies were born. And he actually had a sketch of what later became known as Baby Ganesh. And he then took that to a local manufacturer. He had a prototype created by the end of December of that year. So our daughters were born in January 2017. And by the end of that year, he had an actual working prototype where if you squeezed the belly, actually at the time it was a foot, it sang one mantra. And I was like, wow, like you really made this happen. And I don't think we would have ever gone through with it if we hadn't become parents at the same time, because your priorities naturally are different, right? I think it's because we were both kind of going through this like life stage together. We felt really, really, I think, compelled to bring this idea to life. And it's exactly like you said that, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. If the one thing that all kids across the world have in common, regardless of their background or anything, is that they all have plush toys at a minimum, right? And they all
Yes.
have books. And so his idea was really like, well, plush toys exist, books exist. Why aren't there anything that are representative of our Hindu identities? Because if we know that kids are going to be playing with toys from literally the time that they're born, so we're just trying to give parents a way to make our culture like that much more easily accessible. Because let's face it, like, we don't necessarily, prioritize going to the temple every single week. If you can bring the aspects of going to the mandir like into your home through this really like simple manner of just like a plush toy or a book, well, why not, right? Because we are all, I think, strapped for time, and we're all looking sort of for easier ways to immerse our kids in our culture. And as I was saying earlier, that we have to have the intent, right? Everything begins with intent. So buying the toy is the first step, like that the parent takes, but then ensuring that it's sort of like front and center of like your kid's playroom, making sure that you teach them like how to play with it, how to treat it with respect, as opposed to perhaps like other toys that they may play with, right? So parents are just as an integral of a role in when it comes to play.
I always say that you have to first reach for the low hanging fruit, which is toys and books. And the fact that you have made that tool now available easily for parents, especially for families like mine, where we probably don't have the time to attend events all the time or go to the temple and do all of those things. At least we always have a certain presence, right? But tell me something, Avni. Despite the fact that we put in our best efforts, I am sure that there's going to be stages where our kids are sort of going to reject the Indianness, may even feel embarrassed about it. They don't want to speak the language. They don't want to wear the clothes. They just want to be a part of the dominant culture. I'm just going to call it the dominant culture because it differs across every country. How would you handle that? Have you already experienced some of it? Or if you do in the future, how would you handle that?
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to sense a little bit of that from my 8-year-old daughter. She's entering that transition phase now where she has a lot of strong opinions about like what's cool, what she feels comfortable doing. And of course, I try to respect her wishes and not try to make her do things forcefully. So, perfect example is like when it was New Year's and we had made it a tradition to go to the temple on the first day of New Year's. Well, like the calendar New Year and also like Diwali New Year, so technically 2 New Years. Well, technically 3 because in my family we're also like half Bengali, so like we
And
have a lot of New Years. Yeah, but so now she's gone to a point where she's like, oh, do I really have to? And I'm like, yes, we do. And like, I remind her, I'm like, hey, remember how we do X, Y, and Z for like other holidays? Like, so this is like something we just do. But I also try to make it as fun for them as possible. Like, so for example, Vasant Panchami Saraswati Puja just passed. And so we've been celebrating it now for the past few years. And I try to make it really, really like simple and like fun. So, for Saraswati Puja, I tell them that, oh, Saraswati's favorite color is yellow. And I explain why, because yellow is like, represents spring. And like, what do you see in spring? Like, you see flowers. What color flowers? So first, like, I have them like wear yellow clothes, whatever they can find. It doesn't have to match. It's fine, right? This is not for the gram. It's like just for us at home. And then I go and buy yellow flowers, and then I go and pick out yellow foods from our pantry. So like things that they will eat because it's like prasad, right? So like I pick out the yellow M&Ms from our bag of M&Ms. They pick out the yellow gummies from like the bag of gummies. My son loves banana, so that's a great easy one. He loves goldfish, so that's a great easy one. My daughter loves benda, so I get like a yellow one for her. And it's simple that way. And they love like doing the arti because they feel like special playing with fire. And then we sing one mantra, which is the Gayatri mantra, which they all know. And then after we finish that, we sing happy birthday. And of course, we have our own Saraswati plush like in the month there. And then we collect a bunch of books, any books that have a yellow cover or a yellow binding. And then I lay out 3 pieces of paper for each of them. I give them a yellow pencil, and I've traced out for my younger 2 kids, I've traced out Om and their names in like dotted lines, and then I just have them trace over it. Because again, and I kind of explain like the significance behind all these things that we're doing. So first I explain, why everything is yellow. Then I explain why we're tracing our names, because she is the goddess of knowledge, of music, of arts, all those things. And I try to do these things even though they're not like technically the correct way to like celebrate Saraswati Puja. But this age level that I'm at right now in my parenting journey is what works for us. So for me, what's important is that like, hey, like we have taken time out of our day to acknowledge the fact that it is somebody's birthday, somebody as in like this goddess's birthday, and this is how she likes to celebrate the day. Different gods have different preferences, right? Like for Durga, like baby, we go do Garba for her birthday, For Krishna, we like to put him in the swing, and we do the Jula. Like, so everyone has different preferences. And then this naturally, elicits some like curiosity and questions. Like, so my oldest very astutely asked me one day, she was like, well, how come Durga gets to celebrate her birthday for 9 days and Ganesh gets celebrated for 10 days, but how come Saraswati only gets 1 day and like Krishna only gets 1 day? And I was like, well, that's a really good question. And then so sometimes these questions end up like, in my Theology Thursday post that I do. But, but that's what I love. Like, I love the fact that, they're thinking about these things, that whatever little effort that may feel little to us may not be so little in the grand scheme of things. So I think what I would want parents to take away from all of this is that there is no right or wrong way. Like, this is my way. And, here are the tools like to maybe help you in your journey if it's important to you. And then, do the work now, lay the foundation now, and like let plant the seeds of curiosity and just make it really fun for them so that they don't feel like it's such a drag and it's such a bore and it's like, oh, like, God, I have to go sing the arthi. It's like, well, no, like, let's just like make it fun, because like I'm like not all that like religious like myself. What I do find to be really important is like that we don't lose that part of our identity. So whatever you can do, like just do it. That no one's here to judge you. Like just don't put it on the gram if you're afraid of like being judged, but just do it for your own 4 corners of your home.
I love that. I love that you're meeting them in the middle. And you're right. Like maybe if you were to put a prasad thali with gummy bears and M&Ms in it, there's going to be some trolls on the internet who's going to be like, hey, what are you doing? But that's what works for your kids. If that is what gets them to the mandir or the murtis, right? Instead of the murtis, if you're putting a plushie in there, and if that kind of piques the interest of the younger ones, if this is what it takes for them to be interested and stay through with you and really enjoy the customs, and that's that, right? It's a huge win, because what you said earlier is that times are changing. Wow, I've learned so much from you today, Avni. Like my girl is only 3, but I'm just so filled with ideas and more importantly, inspiration, for that, keep that intent alive, to keep those traditions going, because genuinely they matter. They really matter. It's such a strong part of your identity that you want to hold on to as much as you can.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us, I think, it sounds so cliche to say, but like, how they say, like, what makes you different is your superpower. And like, I don't ever want, like, I would feel like a failure as a parent if my kids grow up feeling embarrassed of their identities and their roots. And that's the one thing that I really want to make sure that they take the greatest pride and joy in. And like when I show up to my kid's school to like, celebrate Diwali or Holi, like, I go and dressed up in like Indian clothes, like, with the bindi and everything. And right now they still get excited by that. Like, oh, like my mom is here. Look at her. Like, look at her. She's wearing her pretty Indian clothes. I don't know. Maybe there will come a point in time when they're like, oh God, like mom, can you like please not like, kind of dress like that? I don't know. I will cross that bridge when we get to it. That's what's really important to me, that our kids like don't feel ashamed. Like they need to hide that part of who they are. And I think the the earlier you start, the more you fun, like the more fun you make it seem, the more natural you make it seem, I think the easier it becomes to really have these two very different but very important parts of your identities coexist.
Wow, I don't think you could have said it more beautifully than that. It's just start early, make it fun, and just like like the same way you can't have too many toys, you can't have too many occasions to celebrate in the year. You know, there's room for everything. There's room for Chinese New Year, there's room for Halloween, there's room for Thanksgiving, and there's lots of room for Holi, Diwali, Janmashtami, and
Yeah,
everything.
5 days in a year, like it's yeah, you can make it happen.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Avni. Like we have learned so many things today. And everybody who has watched this episode, I hope you have come, taken away lots of creative ideas to bring these Hindu and Indian cultures and customs to your family to keep them all interested. If you enjoyed this conversation and you would like more parenting content like that, like and subscribe to our channel. And do go and follow Modi Toys on their Instagram and their website and get the best possible plushies for your kids to keep them close to their Indian roots.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.